There's a kind of silence that only heaven can give. It's the kind of silence that comes not from forgetting, but from purpose. And if you've ever knelt down, tear-streaked, desperate, and whispered, "God, are you listening?" only to be met with silence, then you know exactly what I mean. Maybe you've prayed again and again, fasted, believed, declared every promise in the book, stood in line for every altar call, and yet the problem remains. Maybe it's a sickness that refuses to go. Maybe it's anxiety that clings to your soul like a shadow. Maybe it's a child who's wandered so far from the faith that it hurts just to speak their name. Or a financial burden that wakes you up every night. Or a marriage that feels more like a battlefield than a covenant. You've cried out like David, "How long, O Lord?" But there's no thunder from heaven, no shaking earth, just silence. But friend, before you give in to the lie that God has forgotten you, before you assume that unanswered prayer means abandoned prayer, let me tell you a story. Not about someone who was weak in faith, but about a man who wrote half the New Testament, a man who healed the sick, cast out demons, and raised the dead. A man who had visions of heaven so glorious, he couldn't even describe them with human words. Let me tell you about Paul. Paul had a problem. We don't know exactly what it was. Some say it was a disease, some think it was depression, others believe it was spiritual torment, but Paul called it what it felt like. A thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan, sent to buffet me. In other words, this wasn't just a mild irritation. It was torment. It was exhausting. It was relentless. And Paul did what every believer would do. He prayed. Not once, not casually, not just in passing. 3 times, Paul says. 3 times he pleaded with God to take it away. And if you know Paul, you know he wasn't a man of weak prayers. This is the same Paul whose handkerchiefs healed the sick. The same Paul who prayed in prison until the earth shook and doors flew open. When Paul prayed, things happened. Except this time, they didn't. Instead of removal, Paul got a message straight from heaven. God said, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness." That was it. No deliverance, no miracle, just grace. And for many of us, that feels like the hardest kind of answer, because we don't want grace, we want release. We don't want God to hold our hand through the storm. We want Him to stop the storm. But hear this, God did not abandon Paul. God gave him something deeper. God gave him strength in the storm, not just deliverance from it. And in that moment, Paul's perspective shifted forever. Now let's pause here and ask a hard question. Why would God allow a messenger of Satan into the life of someone so faithful? Why would God let one of His most powerful servants suffer like this? Paul gives us the answer himself. He says, "To keep me from becoming conceited because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh." Did you catch that? To keep me from becoming conceited, to protect me from pride, to keep me from trusting in myself instead of trusting in God. Sometimes the thorn is not the enemy. The thorn is the guardrail. The thorn is what keeps you from driving off the cliff of pride and self-dependence. God had shown Paul incredible things. He had been caught up into the third heaven, heard things no human was permitted to speak. With that kind of spiritual access, Paul could have easily begun to think of himself as invincible, special, superior. But God loved Paul too much to let pride ruin him. So He allowed the thorn. He allowed the messenger of Satan not to destroy Paul, but to develop him. And yes, that's a hard truth, but it's a necessary one. God is not just in the business of delivering you from your enemies. He's in the business of saving you from yourself. Because sometimes your greatest danger is not what's attacking you. It's what's growing inside you, quietly. Pride, entitlement, self-reliance. And God knows that a clean soul is more important than a comfortable life. So if you're asking why the problem won't go away, or why the pain has lingered, maybe it's protecting you from a version of yourself that would have walked away from God if life got too easy. Maybe the thorn isn't punishment. Maybe it's protection. Paul came to understand something that few people ever do. The greatest battles in life are not always the ones you can see. They're the battles within. And if God allows a thorn, a struggle, a weakness to remain, it's not because he delights in your pain. It's because he's preparing you for a power that requires deep humility to carry. Remember, Jesus wore a crown of thorns before he wore a crown of glory. The thorn comes before the throne. So maybe you're not weak because you failed. Maybe you're weak because God is preparing you for something greater than comfort. Maybe the thorn is not punishment. Maybe it's permission. Permission to rely on God more deeply, to experience grace more fully, to walk with Jesus more closely than those who live in comfort ever could. Because let's be honest, when life is easy, we pray less. When things go well, we lean on our own strength. But when life breaks us, we remember. We remember the one who carried the cross, the one who knows what it means to plead, "Take this cup from me," and still say, "Not my will, but yours." Jesus knows unanswered prayer too, and he trusted the Father through it. Can you? Now, don't get me wrong. God still heals. God still delivers. He still parts Red Seas and shuts lions' mouths and raises Lazarus from the grave. He still does miracles. But sometimes the miracle is you, still standing, still worshiping, still praying, still believing. Sometimes the greatest testimony is not what God takes away, but what he strengthens you to endure. The miracle is what God is building in you. It is a better version of you, humbler, trusting, believing, and ever relying on the Creator. So here's the truth that no one wants to preach. Sometimes God's silence is not rejection, but redirection. Sometimes the unanswered prayer is not a failure of faith, but a doorway into deeper faith. Sometimes the thorn stays because the grace grows. You may never understand why that particular battle hasn't ended, but you can know this: his grace is sufficient, not barely enough, not just getting by enough, more than enough. Enough to carry you, enough to hold you through the night, enough to fill your lungs with breath each morning, enough to give you peace that makes no sense, enough to say, "Even if you don't, I will still trust you." So what do you do when the thorn stays? You do what Paul did. You stop begging, you start boasting, you stop asking, "Why me?" and you start declaring, "Use me." You stop focusing on what God hasn't done and start standing on what he has already said. "I will never leave you nor forsake you. My power is made perfect in your weakness. My grace is sufficient." Let the thorn do its work. Let it strip you of pride. Let it drive you to your knees. Let it carve out space for God's power to rest on you. Because the goal was never a perfect, pain-free life. The goal was Jesus. And if the thorn gets you closer to him, then maybe, just maybe, it's a gift in disguise. So here's your call to action. Don't quit praying. But if the answer doesn't come the way you expect, don't lose heart. Instead of asking God to take the thorn away, ask him to show you the strength he's already placed within you. Instead of waiting for the storm to end, ask him to teach you how to walk on water. You are not forgotten. You are not ignored. You are not being punished. You are being strengthened. So today, stand up, wipe your tears, and declare this over your life. His grace is sufficient for me. His power is made perfect in my weakness. Say it again. Say it until your fear breaks. Say it until your hope rises. Say it until the thorn doesn't feel like your enemy, but like the very place God is writing your victory story. You may not have chosen the thorn, but you get to choose how you respond. Choose grace, choose trust, choose Jesus. Even in the silence, even with the thorn, especially with the thorn, because that's where the glory begins. Drop a comment below if you know God is working in you despite the presence of some thorns. Like the video and please subscribe to the channel to help us grow and be able to bring more inspiring messages your way. God bless you.